Office of Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, Mylan, Denerstein. Chief Diversity Officer for U.S. House of Representatives 117th and 118th Congresses, and Chief Strategist for Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Dr. Sesha Joy Moon. And Global Business Executive and CEO of CoQual, a global think tank that researches workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion, Lanaya, Irvin.
Thank you so much for coming out on this morning. This is a very important topic, but let me just start by saying this. The reason why I'm glad we're having this conversation today on a Sunday is because today is the day many of us would be worshiping or going bedside Baptist or catching the highlights of church on Instagram. But what dropped into my spirit as we were doing this is that many have been worshiping at the altar of white supremacy, the altar of injustice, the altar of racism. And I'm so glad that I have this amazing lit panel of women on this morning that is going to shed some light in dark places, because I believe that there is something that happens when a woman walks through the door. And baby, when it's a black woman, right? So let's get into this conversation just off the bat. I want you all to define diversity, equity, and inclusion, what it is not. And I want to just quote the Heritage Foundation that says that it does not promote racial harmony, instead may in fact be manipulative, unlicensed attempts at psychology. I'm just going to go down the line and answer that. Would you, Mylan, start for me on that one?
Sure. Well, good morning. It's great to be here with such a distinguished group. And I just want to say that hearing that quote, it makes me so sad because it's so misguided. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is really a very basic principle about fairness and equity for all of us. And not just black people, all people. And really, it's a choice organizations make to invest in equity and the promotion and inclusion of diverse people, and especially black people. I think what those types of organizations have done is try to use affirmative action where there's actually a racial preference for a particular group and try to turn that into that's the same thing as diversity, equity, inclusion, and it just isn't. Affirmative action is to remedy past discrimination. It's embedded in our laws, it's embedded in our court cases, it's embedded in executive orders and in regulations, and we'll talk a lot about that later. But the point is, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's about us being able to have the same opportunities as other people.
Sesha.
So in the essence of creating acceptable and accessible spaces, I want to share that my pronouns are she, her, hers. If anybody is joining us live or streaming, I want to describe myself in case anybody identifies with visual difficulties. I'm a black woman wearing a tan fedora, orange glasses, bamboo earrings, a red lip, and a floral sundress. A couple of things. I want to start off with where the definition came from. And I might challenge to say it's not misguided. It's quite guided. It's quite intentional. The definition that the current anti-DEI movement has advanced is diversity is putting identity above merit by rewarding and punishing individuals based on a hierarchy of oppressor versus oppressed. Equity is treating all inequality as illegitimate and forcing group equalization through inequality of outcomes. And inclusion is restricting the range of oppressing discourse and excluding white Christian conservative men. Direct quote. Those who do this work know that that's not the definition of DEI. In Congress, how we defined it was that diversity was the practice of ensuring that the congressional workforce represented all segments of society in which we were elected to serve. That equity is making sure that the processes were fair, just, and impartial for those communities. And then also ensuring that inclusion was acknowledging, appreciating, and applying their contributions. We also were very important about we're very intentional about put in a focus on accessibility, ensuring that the infrastructure allowed the fair and free usage of those systems also. I think that's important because when you think about diversity and we're focusing on a lot of race talk, our dimensions of representation really expanded from everything from age all the way down to accessibility within rural communities and limited broadband access. Any part of your life where you are underserved or underseen as it related to legislating your life.
So we just set that record straight. Lanaya, would you want to comment on how you see what it is and what it ain't?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's a shame that people are being compelled to believe that this work is in any way about exclusion, because it's the exact opposite. To Mylan's point, it is very much about ensuring folks have fair access to opportunity, right? This is about fairness in promotion processes, in pay, and opportunity to develop in one's work environment. We've seen a politicization of things that are very much just about ensuring people are treated more equitably, right? In our healthcare systems, in our schools, in our workplaces. And, I'll be honest, the 3 letters DEI have become a proxy for race work.
Come on, absolutely.
And I do think, this anti-DEI, anti-woke, anti-opportunity rhetoric is really just anti-blackness veiled in a very, very strategic and thoughtful movement against our progress.
And effective.
There was an article, I just looked at the title, and it said, here's why some white people love the myth of mediocrity, because it is easier to believe that the world is fair than to make it so. DEI has been blamed on everything. When Silicon Valley collapsed, they blamed it on DEI. When the daggone cargo ship hit the bridge in Baltimore, they blamed it on DEI. DEI is being wrapped up in Ukraine. DEI is being wrapped up everywhere. Somehow, and now they are even referencing that when it comes to Vice President Kamala Harris. But before we do this, I want to just go down very quickly. I want to ground this small time that we have left in a little bit of history. And so talk about why we are even at the spot of DEI. And I'll open that up to our panel.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, so I think our panelists have actually said this. I mean, there is a well-organized, well-funded movement. There are 16 organizations currently whose goal is basically to take away our freedom and the freedoms of other people, period. They want to roll back everything and advance themselves, plain and simple. It is exactly what you say. It's about, I feel entitled to X and I deserve it, and somehow that means it's meritorious, which is just not true. That is a myth. Everybody knows we're all human. We are all capable. We just need the opportunities and a fair chance, and we will succeed. So I think the history is there are at least 16 groups. Since the Supreme Court's decision eliminating affirmative action, which happened a year ago almost to today, in higher education. And think about that. For years, as Black people, first of all, we worked for free because we were enslaved. And now to say that all that is done and everything is fine is just simply not reality. And eliminating the ability for schools to make up in the smallest of ways for what's been done is disgraceful. Candidly, it's disgraceful. And that erosion by our courts, our Supreme Court, has been going on for a long time, much longer than the Supreme Court decision in the Harvard case and the North Carolina case last year. I mean, if you look 10 years ago in Gratz v. Bollinger, the Supreme Court said you can't use racial preference in points with the University of Michigan. So it's been coming because they are organized, because they are committed to their mission, and because they don't care. It is not a secret. You can all go online and read all about all of this. It is very transparent. And it is very, very deliberate. I do agree with you.
It's targeted and intentional, and we've got to be targeted and intentional in the work that we do here. Sesha, I want you to put some numbers to this. When we talk about the truth of DEI, what it does and what it creates from the boardroom on down, because the numbers go against the conversation that is being put out by people like Project 2025, which we will get into.
Okay, can I get into that first before I talk
Get
about the
into
numbers?
it, get into it.
I woke up to find, we were joking in the back about black jobs. So waking up to the headline that America may soon be subjected, that word was very powerful in this headline, to the country's first DEI president, Kamala Harris. There's a black woman who went to Howard. There's a woman with a JD.
Come on.
There's a woman who became the attorney general, the first black vice president, but her blackness is her ultimate disqualifier. And so when you talk about the proxy, I think that is very powerful. I know that we're talking a lot about Project 2025, but I really need for people to go all the way back and research Project 1980. This work was started before the presidency of Ronald Reagan. You had 360 scholarly organizations come together to create a nearly 2,000-page volume of documents for a conservative agenda in this country. Right now, what you are seeing is it come to full fruition. This is an exercise that happens in 4-year intervals based on the presidency. Whether, regardless of the outcomes in November, then that project will just get stronger, because then they'll have another 4 years to continue to plan. Why I need for people to understand the narrative work is because it's very important. I really try to just say their words so that we know exactly, because they're not like forcing us any longer to read between the lines. So Project 2025 is also supported by a three-line, three-pronged strategy. Narrative line, first, utilize both social and mass media to share stories to inspire an emotional response through public discourse and debate about the elimination of DEI-related initiatives. Second line, policy. Leverage the manipulated narrative from the first line as a source of permission and persuasion to advance popular policy reforms that are legally defensible, transitioning from anti-DEI strategy from a slogan to a solution with a 70-30 split in public support to eliminate the profession. And right now what we are up against, just to be quite honest, is the third one, which is action line. Combine the first and second line in order to change the rules of the game to advance the elimination of DEI. Now, I'm gonna let other people chime in on some of the statistical numbers, but I'm just gonna talk about Congress really quick. That was the best job of my life, but it was also the hardest. I was appointed by Nancy Pelosi, I was retained by Kevin McCarthy, and I was asked to stay until they eliminated my office by Mike Johnson. To survive 3 speakers in the 117th and 118th Congress is no small feat. But why I wanna mention that is because a Republican and a Dem, 2 white men from Gettysburg, helped to protect me and my team for nearly 2 years when our office was supposed to be eliminated in 6 months. 225 conservative office used our services, and 197 Democratic office used our services. So to say they saw the value in DEI, they used it every day. We have more Republican offices use ODI than Dems. And so right now, I think what we're seeing, though, is where you are positioned with the seat at the table. And so I'll let other people chime in on some statistics so I can share the stage. But I got my numbers, too, if you want them, sis.
No, I think it's important to bring out some numbers. Lanaya, go ahead.
No, I think it's it's interesting because you've outlined something that has been so thoughtfully put forth. Not 6 months ago, not 12 months ago. We're talking multiple election cycles, multiple stakeholder groups, right? Within politics, within business, within every fabric of society more broadly. But it's interesting because I think that this pointed attack is actually the only way to pursue this, because there actually is sufficient research to point to the fact that diversity, equity, inclusion actually is great for business.
Correct.
It's great for economies, right? It makes it so that the drugs that are developed have greater health outcomes, right? It's one of those things where we know that diverse boards make better decisions. Diverse teams drive better outcomes and innovation. There's endless CoQual, our organization, we conduct research, and we have plenty of research to show that, teams with the greatest diversity pick up market share, right? It is not something that is a myth. It's actually been proven. There's data to demonstrate that it matters, and I do think that more of this has to do with power and who owns it. And I fundamentally believe that what we're seeing in way of backlash is last stand for those who've been power holders for generations. Demographically, right? 18-year-olds in this country, majority of them are people of color. 53% the last time I checked. That's our emerging workforce. Those are our future executives. Those are our future board directors, creators, designers, engineers. So a lot of this backlash is just fear of inevitable change. There's been a browning of America. It's not happening. It's already happened.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because when we were going over this, the stats were saying that I was looking up was saying by 2043, this nation will be predominantly a nation of color. And that browning of America, we're even seeing a redefining of browning.
Can I just say one thing, ma'am? While we're talking about these numbers, I do want to, because it is browning. And it's important to know that the disparities still exist. According to Anita B., out of $450 billion in donations to nonprofit organizations in 2019, less than 4% were awarded to those led by people of color. Let's go to Black women being the highest group of entrepreneurs in this country, college educated, but yet less than 1% of venture capital firms with investments to Black women. $1.6 trillion in student debt, 43% more than our counterparts in the world. 6% of the national workforce, yet right now only one Black woman in a CEO position at an S&P Fortune 500 company. Or even when we look at labor force, 64% Black women, but yet we still make 67% on the dime. And when we think about the fact that we are currently at the largest convening in Black women in this country, right now we're having a conversation about the intersection of government and entertainment and technology and music and sports. UCLA does an annual report on the Hollywood, pretty much on Hollywood diversity. They found that with the browning of the country, despite it, in Hollywood, less than 2 to 1 composed among theatrical film leads, less than 2 to 1 theatrical film directors, and approximately 2 to 1 for theatrical writers. But this is my favorite statistic. The films that cast at that 31 to 40% BIPOC for our national parity levels, then were the highest median global box office receipts. And so DEI is a competitive advantage globally, and not just for companies, but for our country, and not just for your success, but also for your soul.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback on what my esteemed panelists have said, and I think it's really important. I want to just give you 2 concrete examples recently. Tractor Supply, a big company, and in a matter of 3 weeks, through a social media campaign, they reversed course and changed their whole DEI program and eliminated offices. Similarly, and this is a different perspective, the Fearless Fund, which is a Black venture capital fund and foundation founded by Black women that funds women of color businesses. And you heard the statistic about how less than 1% of $1 trillion goes to Black women business owners. Were sued by one of the leaders of this movement, Edward Blum, who brought the Harvard case, for a $20,000 grant program for Black women. And I think that gets to your point about eliminating browning. And let's just go one step further. Who else are they fighting about? What kind of AP class and what kind of history can be taught about Black people? I mean, that is, it's hard for me to talk about and not get emotional and passionate, because it is my history being defined by people who don't want to accept the reality of what's happened in this particular country.
But do want to put up the 10 Commandments. And when I saw that, I said, is Jesus going to be Black? I was just wondering. How are we about to talk about the word? I just wanted to know what the representation was going to look like. But what gets me, ladies, as we and I want to get to some Q&A, is that as we talk about these conversations, for those who may be watching online or those who are watching in person, we know this, right? We know this, we hear this, we know this. So it's not that the other side doesn't know either. It is that it does not matter. That is when we get into these alternate truths. And that's why I opened up by saying they are worshiping at an altar of injustice and white supremacy. And so the only thing that can tear down that God that they have erected is bringing forth truth, which is why we need people. Even your silence can be complicit, which is what Dr. King told us, which is why we have to leave this place and talk about what you are hearing today and then figure out what the solutions are. The solutions first start with yourself, then in your own home, out to your community. I want to switch for a second before we open up and just say, I want to hit some concrete solutions. What is it that we need to be doing? I'm going to start with mine. I need y'all to support black media, especially black-owned and operated media, because when I hear people say, what is Vice President Kamala Harris doing? I want to know, are you actually looking at American Urban Radio Networks? Number one, because she travels with a pool, just like the president. All of the networks are there when she does something. They have the option at the end of the day to broadcast what she does and what she does not do. And I don't see them talking about this economic opportunity tour that she has been doing. I don't see them talking about how she has been helping to create some of this bipartisan legislature that has been going forward. That's my piece. I'm gonna leave it up to you, Mylan.
So I'm an optimist, and so something I learned at Essence this week, somebody else used this quote, so I'm gonna use it. When people build fences, we build tunnels. And now I'm gonna add to it, we can fly over. We build planes too. So I think we just have to dig deep, not be complacent, not be accepting, and be relentless in the pursuit for justice. Because too many people have sacrificed too much for me, and I know my panelists feel the same way, to be sitting on this stage. And I am not about to let that change.
Listen, our ancestors have been here before in multiple iterations. Stacey Abrams, very much so, like you said earlier on the panel, is that DEI was not created in like this lab in 2020. It has been associated with every social movement in this country. I think right now
since 1619. Can we take it back there? Okay.
I believe this is the time to lean in. I believe that this relentless last-ditch effort means because we've actually made some forward movement. And so for DEI professionals, I hope that we just take advantage of this opportunity, because I see opportunity right now. Take care of ourselves in this time, because it is a hard time.
Can you double back on the opportunity part? What is the opportunity that you see at this time?
I believe right now we have a real opportunity to really formalize our profession. I believe, like, sometimes this skepticism makes me excited, because it's like, oh, that's the gap that you see? All right. Right now I'm seeing time where we can build competency models, where I'm seeing that we can develop position descriptions on what truly is a chief diversity officer, that we can expand the scope of DEI from just personnel to public policy and bleed throughout the entire tentacles of your organization. I see so much opportunity right now, which is why shout out to Alfonso and the Global Black Economic Forum for giving us an additional 10 minutes to talk about this conversation. Because it is important. But the biggest thing, I'm nonpartisan. I truly am, guys. I really am. But I need for people to vote. And I need you to vote in your best interests and the best interests of your community. I'm going to give y'all two quick things just to remember. And again, I'm nonpartisan, but I'm just going to state some facts. The vice president was here yesterday. It's not just the principal and the politician, it's who's behind them. The vice president has one of the most diverse offices in the history of the vice presidency. She has crafted a team that looks like America. Leader Jeffries was here on Friday, who, just saying, putting it out there, he will be the first black speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, okay? And I need for people to understand, he made sure to also appoint a young lady named Tasia Jackson, who is the first black woman to ever hold that position. She is the highest ranking Democratic staffer on that Hill. And so what I need for you to vote is because you're not just voting for the politician, you're also voting for the person behind them who is gonna legislate our lives.
Yes, I love that, I love that. What give us something that a takeaway for people before we get to the questions as far as the action going after this?
Yeah, I think just to complement what's been shared, I think there's plenty of work to do when we talk about the profession, when those of us who are in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. But I think collectively as a community, there's a tremendous opportunity for us as well. I do believe we spend a lot of time with large companies, some who are still very much committed to this. And internally, they're spending time with their legal counsels and others to say, hey, how do we weatherproof this work, right? Against this shifting social, political, legal landscape. And they're leaned into things such as equity and debiasing efforts. You know, things that are universally beneficial to talent, right? Whether it's sponsorship or psychological safety, these are things that they realize that culturally it matters for everyone to have. So it's great. We do believe that there are opportunities for institutions to continue to lean in here. But I think there's an opportunity for us as a community as well. In our data, we see that Black women are still 4 times as likely to be passed over for promotion by equally or less qualified peers. Black men are twice as likely to feel they're just being evaluated by completely different criteria altogether in the work environment. The likelihood that a Black woman will be looking for a new role in some of these large companies in the next 6 months is multiples higher than peers. So we can wait around for them to see us, or collectively we could create opportunity for one another.
Yes. I have 2 questions that I want to get to very quickly, and I'll open this up to the panelists. I'll just have one person answer one and the other question. The first question is, do you see a possibility for DEI initiatives to become federally and locally enforced?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. One of the top things that if Leader Jeffries is then coronated as the speaker in January is that he will reestablish the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and he will insulate it as a part of public policy. And I think that's just going to be a major step in the right direction. When we talk about opportunity, I think what we have seen is how easily they could be dismantled, and so we're learning a lot of lessons right now on how to reestablish some of these capabilities.
I do want to remind people that may not know that when President Biden got in office, he instructed all 95 agencies to first look at how they can go after equity within each of their departments. And they all have a plan that's on the website.
Executive Orders 13985 is for external. Executive Order 14035 is for internal, which was supplemented by over 15 additional DEI-related executive orders.
Didn't I tell you they was going to light this room up? All right. Second question. Do you see a possibility? Wait a minute, hold on. What does an ideal DEI workforce environment look like, and how can we, companies, accomplish that ideal environment for everyone?
Well, the ideal environment is one in which everyone's fully activated, right? They're able to bring their most unique contributions into the work environment and be celebrated for those unique contributions. I think there's an opportunity for organizations to understand that a lot of the barriers are systemic. So, I think those of you in corporate spaces, I think the opportunity is to really just begin to look at your talent systems end to end. Because I think you debias those, it benefits everyone. Where is bias creeping into recruiting and talent acquisition, how folks are being developed, promoted throughout an organization? If you really get at the system, then you don't require a figurehead. Only the chief diversity officer to be championing, more fair and equitable access. You don't have to have the one CEO who gets it, right? Because oftentimes we have organizations who are like, oh, we lost leadership. We don't have the same air cover. We don't have the same buy-in. If you really, really focus on the actual process, the systems around which your people and culture are framed, then you don't have to rely on any one man to validate our existence.
I love it. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much. Before we came on this stage, someone said, your necklace looks a little heavy, is it? I said, it is not as heavy as what's going to happen, the yoke that they're trying to put around your neck, all right? Thank you, everyone, for coming out for our panel discussion on DEI.